Well, good morning, listener, and good morning, viewer. This is another episode in our endless series of chin wags across the border. How are you this morning, Pat?
And granted, on Friday morning we were talking about the beautiful sunlight and all the rest of it,
Yeah.
but we're back to a damp scrub again this morning. But anyway, hey Jude, let's be clear. Let's go for the positive. Jesus, lovely. Now I was sitting there looking at the 6:30 last night, and we're
That's
still light in
right.
the sky.
I noticed exactly the same thing at half six. I said, geez, that's fantastic. That's that.
Yeah.
There's no turning back from here. There'll be
No,
no
we're
time
we're
for
well
it
on
on
the
the
way.
slide.
Jude, last week wasn't it? It reached the stage as an equinox. It was. We had 12 hours of light. I think it was Monday or Tuesday with 12 hours of light and 12 hours of darkness. It was equal last week, and now it's
Oh, yeah,
moving up
yeah,
the other
yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah.
More light and
The
less dark.
spring
Yeah,
equinox. Yeah, yeah.
spring equinox. I think that's
Uh,
exactly it. I can
Well, I'm
never.
looking
Yeah.
forward to the big longest day. I don't want it to come too soon, but I just want things to keep getting better. Okay. I suppose we've no choice, Pat. I was asking you before we came on, but we've no choice but to talk about Trump again,
Yeah.
again,
Again.
and it's
Yeah,
especially the way that
we
he dealt with Zelensky. Now, I'm not a fan particularly of Zelensky, but I have to say I was sort of appalled by what I saw. I thought it was like what would you call it? Schoolyard stuff.
yeah,
And they got this wee kid, and the big bully went in there and thumped him a couple of times, and then
yeah,
his fucking mate, pardon me, his mate came in and did the same thing.
yeah.
Would that be your take on it?
Jude, I thought it was the most disgraceful behavior I think I've seen in years. Jude, I read it, but there's a psychologist, and a friend of mine, a fellow called Frank Galligan, put it up on air, and he says a psychologist apparently had a look at it, and he said it was almost like coercive control. They were forcing somebody to express gratitude. They were gaslighting. They were basically telling him what he understood was total lies. They were blaming the victim for what had happened, and and they were this sort of thing that we're peace and diplomacy, and you don't know what you're talking about. He insulted a man whose country has been under invasion for 3 years. Bone Spurs, a man who's never fought for anything, is telling another man who's been on the target for Russians, for assassination, for leading this country where literally thousands have died, that he knows more about war and peace than he does, and all this. Dude, and then there's something seriously wrong. One of the clowns in the press conference, in the middle of a man who's has had to fight for his country for started on about the way he dressed. How superficial was that? By the way, this guy is called Brian Glenn. He's 56. He's the boyfriend of Marjorie Taylor Greene. And if you want to get a village idiot, Marjorie Taylor Greene's the village. She's the far right of the far right of the far right in America. She's a fucking idiot, to put it mildly. Anyway, this guy says, "Do you not have a suit?" Dude, can you imagine if any American leader was in Britain or in Australia or Canada or France, and somebody started on to him about the way they dressed and they, and so on, they'd be insulted, and the American nation would be outraged.
Hmm.
Yeah, Jude, this is the way. And I heard a Republican on this morning. I'll finish up saying Trump was right. Zelensky insulted the American nation, which is doing so much for him. Gee, what a load of bollocks. Absolutely. Anyway, over to you.
I think, well, yeah, I agree with just about everything you've said. I thought that thing about the suit. While it is true that I've noticed your man dressed up in sort of battle fatigues, but see, that's what Che Guevara and what Fidel Castro did all their lives. They
Yeah.
were revolutionaries and they wore this gear. It's sort of pretty convention in any case, And who the hell is that guy to tell anybody what they should wear? He's a journalist supposedly. And he's part of a hand-picked bunch of people who are now allowed to press conferences, and they've thrown out people like the Associated Press and respectable sort of media centers in place of these guys who will weigh in when it's necessary alongside Trump. The other
Yeah.
thing was, I think it's more than that. I think, well, first of all, I think it was a mugging. I think it was deliberately engineered by Trump. This was going to happen. And
Mm.
certainly Zelensky, as they say, took the bait because Zelensky started talking about the fact that his country was invaded by a criminal. and he kept calling him a criminal and I don't know, all
Mm,
sorts of bad things. He was talking about Putin. And now you
mm,
see, we know that Trump's wanting to cozy up to Putin, and
yeah,
that gave him an excuse to really get stuck into Zelensky. I also think, and I'm going now by listening to a podcast, that there's a sort of a realignment taking place, and I don't know whether it's scary or good or bad or indifferent. Uh, that is, you're going to have Russia and the US, and I'm not sure where China's going to come in. Um,
mm,
but then the rest will consist of the EU, the UK, and maybe Canada and perhaps Australia. Um,
mm.
but it's scary when things change like that because these are world powers. But my consolation is that I always worried about Putin and that war, because the bugger has got nuclear weapons. Uh, I feel more comfortable when I hear that Trump's on his side because, you hope that that'll sort of cancel out or at least lessen the chance of them going full out to destroy the world and all of us. Is that naive of
Yeah.
me to say I don't want to die in a
No,
nuclear?
there's a certain element, but Jude, I think you're 100% right. I think the significance of the UN vote last week, I think it was last Monday or Tuesday, I can't remember which day, but Russia, or sorry, America signed up. This is where we're at. They didn't sign up with France and Germany and the UK. They aligned with, this is the Americans, they aligned with Russia, North Korea, Belarus, and I think Eritrea. Not one
Hmm.
of them a democracy, not one of them, right? Uh, and post Friday's debacle in the White House, Zelensky has come to Europe. And did you see Keir Starmer? Keir Starmer normally stands on the steps of Downing Street and waits the person to come up. He left and went to meet Zelensky and give him a hug.
How do you
The,
interpret that?
huh?
How do you interpret that?
I was saying he was sending a clear message. In fact, I think Europe's sending a clear message at this stage. They mightn't agree everything, but the French, the Spanish, the Norwegians, the Irish, the Brits have all come out very, very clearly in favour of Zelensky
Hmm.
and support him after what happened. And I think the message is getting very clear to Europe that Trump and the Americans are no longer our allies. They are not to be trusted. Basically, I think, as you say, Putin has made it clear, I think, to Trump, there's a deal to be done with us in regard to rare earth metals which the Americans needs, and they'll do a deal. And like it's a deal with the devil because I think Putin and Trump are two of a kind. I think they're just immoral and amoral, and they have no conscience about. It's all about business and human rights and democracy and the rule. International rules matter salt
Hmm.
as long as we get rich.
Well, I think it'll have one positive effect. Now, in a way, it's a negative one at the same time, and that is that this is going to push the EU to cohering more firmly together.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
for start, Starmer isn't in the EU, but he's
yeah,
acting like one who is. So it's integrating the UK further into the EU. Maybe they haven't
yeah.
signed any documents, but by taking that kind of lead, and now they're having this conferences at on I don't know when it is, but anyway, sometime
It's,
this week,
this week,
they'll
yeah.
do further sense of integration. And all the Brexit people will be saying, "Oh, geez, maybe we should be sticking with Europe." Now, I'm not saying they're going to change Brexit. I wish to God they would. But I think a lot of them will realise that it was a bloody stupid thing to have done in the first place. So Starmer sees that as a chance to show his willingness to be part of the
Of Europe.
EU. They do say, now I don't know if that's true or not, but they do say that the UK is one of the most effective military forces in Europe.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's true or not, but they do say that that's a very important
Well, they have
element
plenty
of
of
it.
experience.
Hmm?
They have plenty of experience, but
That's right. It's usually with small countries.
but the other thing is, Jude, look, one of the outcomes is that apparently Starmer must have found what 1.2 billion down the back of the sofa. There's some arms factory in Belfast that's going to get a 1.2
Shorts,
billion contract
shorts.
as a church. uh,
Hmm.
for these air to missiles thing type things,
Yeah.
and they're going to take on 200 new workers, etc.,
Uh-huh.
etc., etc.
Uh-huh.
But the whole thing about it is, I think it sent out a very clear message that no, Europe is going to have to change, and I think the Brits have copped on. What here. I'll start again. Daily Mail yesterday, Sunday Mail said the King should revoke the invite to Donald Trump. The Daily Mail, the Sunday Mail, too. I can't believe, and they seem to be. At one stage, they were so far up Donald Trump's backside. So the old right wing in Britain is now turning against Trump. And I would love, like, it'll never happen, Jude, but I would love if they would revoke the state invitation. I really would, if they had the Daily Mail. Wouldn't that be a real slap in the teeth? For Jude, the arrogance of last Friday. I'm still shocked. There was a guy on RT this morning, a Democrat or a Republican, basically said what Trump did was right. Jude, the rest of the world saw it as arrogance, ignorance, that there's a total ignoramus with no class in the White House, and yet the Americans don't see it like that at all.
Well, listen, I suspect that this is sort of a counter argument in a way. I suspect that a lot behind the scenes, this is very often what's happening in terms of negotiations. Guys are shouting at each other, and then they're told to shut up, or they gang up on each other. God knows what. I'd say those are pretty lively things and pretty regular things that happen in the background, never in the front, but in the background. So maybe we shouldn't be too appalled by it. I think it goes on all the time. I bet it does. It's just that Trump, for his own ends, and remember, he did this consciously. For his own
Yeah.
ends, he put this up front, center stage in front.
Yeah,
He wanted to keep,
humiliated the world. Humiliated. You could see Zelensky was under pressure. He was Trump and Vance were at home in the Oval Office.
yeah.
That's their base. Here was a man coming in, doesn't speak English, coming from a war zone. You could see he was uncomfortable. He was speaking a second language, and
Mm,
then they have this clown, a journalist. Who,
mm.
who set up to ask them a question as the way you're dressed. By the way, Jude, let's get this clear. The insult on that is actually quite, the way I'm going on about it. Winston Churchill showed up in fatigues during the Second World War.
Yeah.
He was lauded.
Mm.
Elon Musk showed up the other day in a t-shirt and a jumper and a hat, and not a word said about that. And with his son picking his nose. What else? Uh, there's somebody else. Sorry, guys come in their dress and so on.
Yes.
And they don't come in a suit and all the rest. This
Mm.
thing he insulted the president and the office of the United States.
But you see,
The hypocrisy of the Americans
yeah.
is, stellar.
Yeah, but at the same time, Pat, those are just words. Those are just words and ignorance, and that's all. I mean, nobody stabbed anybody. Nobody declared war on anybody. The things that were happening were highly unsavory and disgusting. But I think it's Trump that he deliberately did that because Trump. The one thing Trump likes is attention, like a child almost, and he got super attention as a result of that. Brouhaha in the West Wing. So I think we shouldn't read into it any big signs. Although behind all that, leave aside the question of the sort of verbal mugging of Zelensky. Behind all that, I think some people say there is a coordinating of international alliances. That Trump gets along well with people, or looks favorably on people who are like himself, right wing and grabbing all the power that they can get. And
Yeah.
that would apply to some of the people in the EU as well. Some of the leaders, like the guys is it Hungary and is it Poland? Where
Urban,
yeah,
Urban.
so that kind of ganging up with those guys could shift things towards, as I say, the EU. I don't know how I say the EU would still under threat, be more coherent or more integrated than it was. You'll not have any country saying, "Oh, I'm going to do a Brexit." I think that's a thing from the past. Um,
Uh,
in a way, well, I found it very interesting, but I think you've got to remember that that's Trump, something he did deliberately. And we're appalled by
uh,
it, but we shouldn't be in a way, because we know he's an ignorant bugger. He'd do anything if he thought it would be help him. And the one thing
no.
he got from it was attention. And yeah, a lot of Republicans thought,
Yeah,
Good
but you
for
see,
him. No
Jude,
shit. No shit.
well, there's two things. If Zelensky had a grovelled, and said, "Mister, I'm so you're the great man, and you're all the rest of it," but Zelensky made the mistake of actually standing up for himself and saying, "Wait a minute, Putin is not a good guy," and you see, Trump doesn't want Putin portrayed as a thug and a whatever.
Mm.
He wants to do a deal with Putin, and he
Yeah.
wants Putin to be seen by the American public as a good guy, not the like. It's an inversion of what happened. Basically, Trump is saying that Zelensky's a dictator and Putin isn't. That Russians had a real thing about going into Ukraine, and
Yeah.
Ukraine should have sorted it out beforehand. It's an
Mm.
inversion of what actually happened. Total inversion. Like Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine did not invade Russia. Zelensky was elected democratically. Putin's been there for 22 years, and all his opponents are either dead or poisoned or whatever, or
Mm-hmm.
exiled. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, but Trump was trying to sell this as and all. But anyway, bottom line, Jude, I disagree with you, by the way, because I think there's that meeting was symbolic of the changing of the guard. I think it was, as you said, was deliberately set up, but it was set up a realignment of where America is headed, and it's not for Europe.
Oh well, yeah. Well, I'm not. I don't. You can't be disagreeing with me. That's how I see it too. I think
Yeah,
they're telling. Well, you see, he's doing this all around the bloody world. He's saying, anybody I trade with, am I paying more tariffs rather than the tariffs, or the cost? Is it an imbalance between us economically?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I gather that the case is that in most instances. There might be a small marginal difference. There might, but nothing
yeah.
much.
Mm,
But Trump is saying, "Oh, you gotta get, we gotta have the same sort of level of expense to import your
yeah,
stuff as you get when you import our stuff." And as a result, he's alienating any number of countries. And it's really, he's doing something that's just a sort of a flaunting of power rather than being sensible and diplomatic and, keeping people
yeah,
together. Um, there's a whole lot of stuff behind this that worries me a bit. One of them
yeah.
is that I agree with you about Putin. Putin did invade Ukraine, and that's the long and short of it. But I think there's more to it than that. I think,
No, you can't. Not. There's not nothing ever is 100% one way or 100% the other.
mm,
Putin had he was given guarantees by NATO and by Reagan or Gorbachev was that NATO would not increase 1 inch towards him, and they
mm,
have gone now surrounded him and so on. And there's all
mm,
that sort of. But the bottom line is, Ukrainians wanted to shift towards the West. They wanted to join
yeah,
the EU. They wanted to join NATO.
yeah, yeah.
Like they have a right to self
Aye,
determination. They are 40 million people. They have
aye.
a right. Just because it doesn't suit Russia doesn't mean it's they're right. But anyway, Jude, move on this one.
Okay.
Apparently, our friend Keir Starmer has a £4 peace plan, and basically beefing up EU support for what do you call it, Ukraine, both military and financially and so on. That him and Macron apparently are willing to put British and French troops, peacekeeping troops on the ground, etc., and then they
Hey,
want America to come back in to be the sort of the icing on the cake,
the
just to
backstop.
provide intelligence and so
Mm.
on. But you said it earlier on. The implications for Europe, that means Europe's going to become a lot bigger. It's going to be a lot more investment. Now, Simon Harris,
Investment
our
in
minister,
weaponry.
and weaponry and so on. And he said there's no doubt about it that some people will going to have to dig deep in their pockets for our own security. But maybe that's necessary now. This whole thing about neutrality and all is going to be back in play because they're going to say, "Hey, can we trust the Russians? Can we trust if America's buggering off and so on?" And by the way,
Uh,
just one final point. I heard a guy on Friday, I think it was, an RT, and said, did you know that there was Russian submarines running around and Russian ships running around the coast of Kerry where the what do you call it, the or
Pipeline.
Cork, where the lines, transatlantic lines are. And apparently, it was a fisherman went up to the captain of the Russian ship. Said, "You shouldn't be here. You're in our waters." Apparently, we don't even have an Irish ship from the navy to go up and do it.
Hmm. Do you think Ireland, you see this triple lock that they're now trying to make just a double lock? so they
Yeah.
won't have to have a UN motion passed before
Yeah.
Ireland would send peacekeeping forces, whatever that would mean. Do
Yeah.
you think that's a good move to move down to just two, a double lock, one the Dáil itself, and I forgot what the other
There's
thing
like
is.
one of the things they said, like China and Russia can block the triple lock,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they said like they are and Russia is not a friend of Ireland's, so they're
Mm.
saying like we in other words are hostage to fortune. In other words, somebody who's not a friend of ours can block us. So that's the argument, Jude. I believe that we should stay neutral. What can we do? We're a small Jesus, Jude. Our army and navy. What do we have? 6 ships. I don't. Do we have a fighter jet? I'm not even sure we do, and so on. So, like, what do we? And we can do a lot more as a neutral country, but there's going to be pressure on it because they're going to say it's hey, no. What happened in the past does not predict what's happening in the future. There's
Do
going to be
you would you so are
our
you
neutrality
saying
is going
that
to be
that's like
challenged by cyber crime, not by boots on the ground.
so are you saying that the south of Ireland is likely to be pressured into joining a military unit of some kind,
Big
European
time,
army?
absolutely big time. I'm certain of it.
Will
Just
they
come on,
resist
you can
that?
see it. The writing's on the wall already.
Would you be in favour of them resisting that pressure?
I'm speaking personally. I don't want any of my grandchildren fighting a war about something that I really genuinely don't. But I
No.
can see where the politicians are going. They're going to say, "Wait a minute, Ireland's going to have all the benefits, but none of the cost." They're going, why should French sons dive to prevent China or Russia coming in here? So the Ireland can sit. But by the way, Jude, they also we're on the extreme west coast. We are a big player and the communications, cyber industry,
Mm, mm,
and all the rest of it. And our lines do need protecting. So what do you do?
mhm, mhm. There's some, is it, there's a little bit of an irony in our discussing this because we're talking about
Yeah,
a country, Ukraine, which was invaded by a bigger power next door led by Putin. There's a
Russia.
guy got up in the Dáil recently, I think in the past week even, Cathal Crowe from I think he was Fianna
Yeah.
Fáil. And he said that the Irish people knew how the Ukrainians felt, that their history of 800 years of being dominated by a near neighbor was something that we've been forced to live with. I sometimes think there's an irony, and I know people laugh at me for saying this. There is an irony in us getting hot and bothered about the invasion of Ukraine and somehow overlooking the fact that the 6 counties in the northeast of Ireland are under the domination of Britain, isn't
Uh-huh.
there?
Yeah.
Or is that just a stupid
Yeah.
old man? So, see, the most people who are watching this, I think, will be saying, that old silly bugger, we're living in the past. For God's sake, the four green fields and broad black brimmer and all that rubbish. Um,
Yeah.
but the fact is that there are 6 counties in Ireland which are maybe they're not militarily dominated anymore, but at the same time, there's a big MI5 unit across the loch from me. And, there's no
Well,
two
but
ways
you
of
know,
looking
know
at
what
it.
they're
The
going
Irish
to.
people don't
But
want the
know what they're going
British
to tell you, Jude.
and running our affairs.
But hold on. They're going to say, to you, look, after the Good Friday Agreement, see the day that you vote for it, you can have it in Ireland. That no, I know you're going to knock your face out when I said that, but that's the reality.
I
It's
know
there's
that's the
no army
reality,
saying
Pat.
you can't. There's no army now saying you can't do it.
That's good. That's good. But try tomorrow having say the Irish people having a system where they told shut down Stormont and told the MLAs get elected to the I mean that would be the Irish people exercising the control of their country. There would be hell to
Yeah,
pay for that. The Brits would be in like a
yeah,
shot, and there would be
yeah,
boots on the ground then. Also,
yeah.
all I'm saying is we have our own situation. We're so used to it. It's so normalized that we just pass
There's
over
no,
it and go to the other
yeah.
thing. That's
I
not to
agree with
say
you
that
totally.
the Ukraine isn't suffering injustice and there aren't other injustices in the world. But let's not forget about home in the
Yeah, but Jude,
arcades.
they're going to say to you, wait a minute, Jude, you're not comparing apples with apples.
Oh,
There are
for
Russian
God.
troops on the ground, there are tanks on the ground, it's invasion, etc., etc., etc. There's no democracy. The Ukrainians can't expel the Russians. They're not even getting much support from certain parts of the world and so on. And Ireland, we've got the Good Friday Agreement, and tomorrow morning, if Jude Collins and Pat McGartin people voted for Irish unity, it would happen because it's
Uh,
democratic. There's
uh,
no
uh,
butch, there's no police force, there's no security force stopping you.
Um, yeah, yeah. Well, in most countries, they don't have two sections which do a vote. You know, the vote in the north and the vote in the south. In most countries, they have a vote. You
Aye,
know, the
aye,
Irish people. The fact is, as things stand, the will of the Irish people is not being enacted. Will of the Irish
aye,
people, full stop. But I agree
aye.
with you. Yes, we're in a better place now, and it's good that we have a road to it. But I must say, I was quite taken aback by that. Were you surprised, or did you see that this Cathal Crowe saying this about?
I think you might have sent it to me last week. I'm not 100% certain of that. I think you did, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I just thought it was would it be? I mean, see, he wouldn't do a sort of a solo run. Surely Mayhall or
uh.
somebody would have run the eye over that before he was allowed to stand up in the Dáil and say it.
No, he's not a government minister, is he? I don't think
No,
so.
no, he's
So
just a TD, but he's a TD.
no,
He's been
no, so
appointed
no, no.
TD.
The only thing is the only time they have collective responsibility is when they're speaking on behalf of the government. The backbench TDs can go for solo runs.
Oh, well, I must feel it is on secure ground because in all cases, what TDs are doing is seeking the advance within the party and make sure they're re-elected. So I'm not sure
Uh,
where he's from, Cathal Crowe, but I'll have to look
no,
that up
neither am
and see.
It might be Dublin.
Yeah. Okay. There's a next. This won't happen until next April or May. April, I think it is. There's going to be a Garda conference, annual conference. Now, last
Hmm.
year, the Garda annual conference did not invite the
Commissioner,
commissioner,
Commissioner.
or I think the minister for justice, or maybe she just withdrew in protest. Drew Harris is not going to be invited to this as well. And the last time the vote was taken as to whether they should invite him, 99% of the Gardaí opposed his rostering plans and said, no, don't invite him. Uh, Drew Harris has been getting 250,000 euros a year since 2018. He's retiring in June. And my question to you, Pat, is you can keep it to 20 words or less. What has he achieved in the period of time when he was collecting a salary of 250,000 a year?
I can't point it. It's basically, uh, but there's riots in Dublin. I think the crime rate's on the rise. Anyway, Helen McEntee was the Minister for Justice the last
Yes.
time. And Solidarity, she refused to go. She was invited, by the way. She didn't go. Jim
Hmm.
O'Callaghan's the minister this time, and he's saying if Harris is not invited, what I call it, the whole issue of his attendance up, he's already he said they must respect the GRA must respect the commissioner. And now he's trying to head off at the pass. I think he's already had meetings off the record with the GRA and so on to
Yeah.
get them to invite it. It's, the Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael government really need the support of the guards, and they need it publicly. They need to be seen to be working together because there's all sorts of difficulties. I know Callan's a different fish of a different color, if you know what I mean. He
That's for
wants
sure.
I want Harris there, so it'll be interesting to see how they resolve this.
Yeah. Do you think should they not invite Harris in yourself?
No, he's the commissioner. They should be invited. But
Hmm.
when 99% of your members don't want you, that's pretty telling. Like it's not up for discussion. Look, it was 51-49. It's
Hmm.
99%. And Jude,
So
there seems to be a lot of discontent about how Harris is running the force. Now, some people in the government spun it that he had introduced because of COVID, he had introduced certain rotas, and that once COVID was over, he wanted to revert to the original rotas. And the cops, they said, had given them an easy life, and they weren't. So, in other words, they said and all he was trying to do was go back to what the old ones were. I don't know how true that is.
I think the Gardaí giving out about rostering plans and Drew Harris being to blame for them. I tend to think of Al Capone being got for tax evasion. Um, you know, given the fact that all the background that Drew Harris has. Okay, let's move on to a wee bit of history. I don't know if you ever read the Irish Times. They have a section, a historical section, and a guy who does blogs for me called Donald Kennedy is very keen on him. But to be honest with you, I don't read him very often. But one of the things he is in today is the fact of a guy who I'm trying to think what his name was now. Oh yes, Mulligan, uh, who was a prominent figure during the War of Independence in the States.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Alexander Hamilton put him up in his house. You know the famous Alexander Hamilton. They made the musical about.
yeah.
Alexander Hamilton funded him to go to Princeton. He was part of a New York volunteer militia that captured four British
Jude,
cannons.
I think it's all the way around. Was it not Mulligan helped Hamilton to go to all these places? Mulligan was a well-off. Was he not a well-off tailor and all
Oh,
the
no,
rest?
you're right. It could be right.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
need to check that. He certainly came from a privileged family, but he was in
Aye,
a
it was
unique
his
position
dad
because,
was an accountant or something.
aye,
He was born in Coleraine, and I think
hmm.
was he about 6 or 7. By the way, he had a great name, Hercules. Hercule
Hercules, yes, I
Cule
love
Mulligan. Jesus Christ, whatever happened to Seamus or Patrick? But anyway, yeah.
That's the
But
kind
anyway,
of name
bottom
that
line is,
Musk would give one of his kids.
uh, apparently, the family, I think he was originally from Coleraine, and they were
That's
seriously
right.
well off. His dad was an accountant or someone, even one
Yeah,
of the accountants way back in the day. So they
yeah.
weren't sort of out
Oh, no, they didn't
navvying.
come over in the
But
famine boat
he
or
owned a
anything. Yeah,
haberdashery shop, and
yeah,
he owned slaves, and I can't remember the name of the slave, but because the slave could travel, nobody suspected the slave being a spy.
mm,
The slave went over and back between the lines, and he apparently the claim is that Hercule Mulligan saved George Washington's life on at least 2 occasions because the rebels were going, or the Brits were going to sort of trap him. But they were going to get him at a port. They knew he was going to travel at a certain time because there was a
yeah,
ferry across or something,
yeah.
and that the slave overheard them or whatever it was. Oh no, sorry. What do you call him? Hercule Mulligan overheard a British soldier in his place who was trying on a jumper or one of these.
Yes.
Heard him saying, and he got his slave to rush out and tell George Washington not to go there. So
Uh,
afterwards, the slave was given his freedom,
uh.
and Hercule Mulligan was held up as one of the great guys.
So you
Uh,
see, without
so what a life!
Coleraine, America might never have had Donald Trump as our president. In
Uh,
fact, it might never have
so
existed.
we should have shot the bollocks.
Speaking of friends of Trump, did you see where there's a fall off in the buying of Tesla? And people that have got a Tesla car are embarrassed by it because they feel it links them to Elon Musk. And I must say, my son actually drives a Tesla in London, and he's also discontent with it. He wants to get I don't know what, BMW or something. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely, Jude. They're calling them now swastikars because Musk did give a Nazi salute. Jude, let's get this on the record. Musk is from South Africa. He
Yeah.
was brought up in that sort of apartheid era. His attitude is certainly he doesn't believe in democracy. He thinks he's one of the masters of the universe type thing. And Jude, I would not own one of his cars if you paid me. They're called swastikars now.
If you were a Tesla was set outside your door, you wouldn't take it.
Jude, I am 100% certain I wouldn't take it.
Huh.
Absolutely
That's
100%.
very
In
interesting.
fact, Jude, I wouldn't even be associated with it. I'm serious, deadly
Well,
serious.
here's an even tougher one. You see this contract that's gone to Belfast to Shorts, I presume, for these
Yeah,
ballistic missiles or whatever they are. Um,
yeah.
um, would you have any feelings about working in, or a son of yours, say, working in Shorts, making these things, or working in Shorts, keeping the machine going?
Jude, personally, I would avoid it like the plague. But Jude, the reality is they're going to be made somewhere. The Russians have attacked. So the moral equivalency is not as good as it used to be. Jude, I remember reading about guys who were making things for torture, things that were
Yeah.
used in various. Jude, they said, well, somebody's going to. Jude, that's no excuse. But
Uh-huh.
having said that, like, Jude, the reality is. They'll be made in Belfast, or they'll be made in Birmingham, or they'll be made in Cardiff, or they'll be made in something. What's the difference?
It's
They
a
will be
very
made.
well. It's a very interesting one. You know, what is the difference? You're right. There's no difference because there are other people
Yeah.
too only too willing to do it. But I'm just wondering if there's any sort of morality attached to it, where you play a part in of any kind, in probably a well-paid job in shorts, making these
Yeah.
things. You know, to what extent should we detect? If we take, for example, goods that come from Israel and say, no way am I
Yeah.
going to buy these things. That's a gesture to sort of hold them at arm's length. Would the same not apply even more so to making weapons? It's a bit like Homer Simpson. Homer Simpson works in a nuclear factory, a nuclear plant, and there's always funny little stuff happening. But I just think that is quite a moral dilemma. And most people, when it comes to the crunch, say, "I the hell with that. I mean, I can't run the world," and they get on with the job.
Yeah, there is an element to it, isn't it? Like we'd all love to be pure, and so on. Like, oh, I got in an argument there quite recently with a guy about. He says all American presidents are the same, and I'm
Ah,
saying no, no. You see,
can't
they
bear
said
that.
they feed the war machine, and I said, are you trying to tell me that Jimmy Carter was the exact same as
Aye, aye, aye.
Donald Trump, or Bill Clinton was the same as George W. Bush.
Yeah.
Some try to, like Obama, he was on the record. I remember in his inaugural address, he said he was reaching out to the Muslim world, and then in his biography, he said that he didn't get much of a response, but at least he tried. Like
Mm.
Donald Trump just insults and right around him. George W. Bush started World War III almost. So where do you go? They're not
Yeah.
all the same.
Well, I agree with you that in fact people who say, "Oh, politicians are all the same," I've heard that inside the last 24 hours, and that gives me a pin
Yeah.
in the butt. I saw a
Yeah.
Republican who shall remain nameless who said you might as well say all lorry drivers are all the same, or all bus drivers are all the same, or all
Yeah.
accountants are all
Yeah.
the same. What a load of rubbish!
Same.
Really. Final
Yeah.
question, Pat. We're in the last minute, so what do you think? Do you flinch when you hear people using words wrongly? When they say, literally,
Absolutely,
my
Jude.
heart was in my boots.
Literally, no, your heart stays in the same place. Jude, no one gets me. There was over 200 people there. There was not over, you go over a wall, there was 200 people there. There's more than 200 people there. Stupid. Oh, and what was the amount of people? It's the number of people. Stupid things. And by the way, and there has been rumors flying around. I've heard that on the radio. There been not has been. You know,
Well, the one that gets me, and I find it, I correct myself, but anyway, they say things like, he held a party he will be holding a party for you and I. Now if the other guy didn't come, he held a party for I. Doesn't make sense. I know we're purists of the language. Okay,
yeah.
we all other people can't reach our standards. Okay, Pat. All the best. Thanks.